There are many mysteries on the island of Sodor. Who is the ghost engine on the old Iron Bridge? Where did Boko go after Season 5? Are Mr. Percival's kids illegitimate? But the biggest mystery of all is, of course, why do the engines have faces?
The trains, I told you they talk. We're just too far away to hear what they're saying.
Over the years, probably hundreds of theories have been put forward, trying to find a logical explanation for why these metal steam locomotives have faces where an empty smokebox door would otherwise be. Of course, we aren't kidding ourselves. We all know that the real reason these guys can talk is because it makes for brilliant stories, and without those faces, we wouldn't have gotten the railway series or the TV show. So, in a way, this video doesn't really matter. But you should still watch it. Not just because I have an insatiable need for people's attention, but also because it's fun. It's fun to speculate about mysteries that we can never really answer. Today, we'll be going through a whopping 14 theories as to why Thomas and his friends can talk and see and breathe. We'll be looking at wholesome and disturbing suggestions in this list, but the two theories I like the most are right at the end, so stay tuned for those. Put your own thoughts in the comments, and without further ado, let's go. The Extension Theory. This theory is mostly based off the words of the Railway series author Reverend Audrey himself, who, as a child, would lie awake at night and listen to the engines running close by his house. The sounds they made sounded human.
And the banker would come up behind, oh yes you can, oh yes you can, oh yes you can.
You can put any words you like to train sounds, can't you?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the Extension Theory says that Thomas doesn't actually have a face, but his face as we see it in the illustrations is an extension of what this engine would be like if he was a human. Thomas's puffing sounds like talking, so Audrey just translated it into the English language. An older engine like Edward is going to sound older, and that's why Edward has a more elderly role in the series. This is what's called anthropomorphization, which is when we take human qualities and stick them on a machine or something else that's not human. Out of 10, I'd give this theory an 8. Although it is a very common one, it doesn't really explain why human characters like the Fat Controller in-universe talk to the engines as though they're actually listening. But still, it's a solid theory, and it is the one that Audrey seems to have been closest to. The Publicity Theory. The Northwestern Railway is not to be trusted in this theory. Sir Topham Hatt wants money, and the easiest way for him to make it is to pretend to the world that the engines do have faces, when in fact they don't. All the railway posters show them with faces, the TV show itself is propaganda, and the whole idea of them having personalities is just a publicity stunt. Children flock to the railway every year, hoping to see Henry sneeze or Percy talking to Harold, and then they always return home disappointed. Maybe Topham, struggling with a difficult post-war economy, even hired Audrey to kick the whole thing off by writing the books. It's a cynical theory, but I am the Thomas cynic, so I'll be generous and give this one a 5 out of 10. The Sudrian Theory. What if Sodor itself is the thing that gives the engines faces? It would certainly explain why the engines we see in real life don't have faces, but the engines on the island do. This theory was another of Audrey's go-to answers when kids asked him why the trains they saw didn't seem to be alive. And that's not unimportant. Even in the classic TV seasons, the island itself is infused with something, giving sentience to things that shouldn't really have it. Think of the face on Boulder or the grabber in Stepney Gets Lost. This idea does still break down though. In the Railway series we see British diesels with faces, Oliver and Thomas very obviously have faces when in England there are tons of examples. And again in the show, engines like City of Truro show up but don't seem to have faces on Sodor at all. I can't hate this theory though, since Sodor is certainly a strange place, and this was another favourite theory of the Reverends. It's another 6 out of 10. The Magic Railroad Theory. In the year 2000, Thomas and the Magic Railroad broke every rule of the Thomas and Friends universe. Part of this was coming up with its own explanation as to why the engines are sentient. The magic engine Lady gives them life. In the movie, Diesel 10 wants to destroy Lady precisely so that the steam engines will be annihilated. Or is it just the steam engines? It's never made clear what gives the Diesels life, but we have to assume that Diesel 10 doesn't want to destroy himself too. The movie emphasises the role of Sodor Cole in reviving Lady. Maybe it's something to do with that. It's just not clear, and that's why this theory gets a 3 out of 10. lots of inconsistency, and a pretty unsatisfying solution, which is basically just explain it away with magic. The chemical reaction theory. One big fan series that has taken a look at this concept is The Stories of Sodor by Victor Tanzig. Within his alternative universe, Tanzig proposes at least 3 theories for why some engines have faces and others don't, and these theories can be applied back onto the original show and books as well. The chemical reaction theory is the first one, and it's the idea that some sort of physical reaction during the building process births engines with faces. Perhaps it's the combination of the natural elements, fire, oxygen, water, and coal from the earth, converging to make a new sort of mechanical life. To be honest, this is another huge cop-out for me, and it doesn't explain why this reaction occurs with some locomotives and not with others. Whereas Magic Railroad says, I don't know, magic, this theory says, I don't know, science, and it's not too satisfying. 4 out of 10. The Prehistoric Theory. Speaking of coal and oil, here's a more obscure theory. Both coal and oil are made up of fossilized remains of animals and plants that died long ago and sunk into the Earth's crust. What if the life of the engines comes from the life of those dead animals and plants? Maybe Gordon was actually a dinosaur in a past life. Even wood-burning engines work within this because wood is a store of biomass energy. Thank you to all my chemistry teachers for your contribution to this video. Unfortunately, electric engines still make no sense with the prehistoric theory, since electricity is entirely lifeless. Stafford, Hugo, and the Peel-Godred engines have no right to be alive if we accept this one. Still, this is one of the most creative theories on the list, so I'm actually going to give it a 7 out of 10. The Attentive Theory. This is a second theory in Tanzig's universe, but it's also one I've seen elsewhere. The basic idea is that engines built with special care or attention are destined to have faces. I'm gonna be honest up front, this is a 1 out of 10 for me. Tanzig's Edward himself says this is a bit flowery, but it's even more flawed than just that. We see a lot of engines in both the books and the show that have building defects, that have either been mass-produced, like Diesel, or designed and built very carelessly, like Henry, Derek, maybe even Smudger. At least the Magic Railroad theory introduces a cool new character and highlights something special about Sodor. This one just puts the power of life and death in the hands of nameless designers. It also means that every engine you've ever seen was built carelessly. No fun. The Designer Theory. The Designer Theory aims to make the Attentive Theory that we just discussed a bit more interesting by arguing that the engine's faces and personalities mimic the faces and personalities of their designers. James's designer thought very highly of himself. Bill and Ben's designer was a prankster, you get the idea. The engines that have faces are the ones where the designers had those very strong personalities, enough for them to manifest into their creations. This theory actually raises some interesting questions. Were there female engines in the series built by female designers? I mean, historically, the engines that Emily and Mavis and other girls are based on were constructed by male engineers. There's also the issue of the troublesome trucks. Are all the people who design wagons just comically evil? It's a 4 out of 10 for me, kind of fun, but even by our low standards, fairly illogical. The Revenant Theory. The final Tanzig theory, this one is a bit creepy. Engines may be the second lives of dead humans. They don't necessarily remember their past lives, but their soul is trapped in the engine, unable to move on. Again, this explains the varied personalities of Topham's fleet, but it's kind of impossible to prove or disprove. By itself, this theory would only be a 2 out of 10, but there is a variant of this idea, not from Tanzig, which I think is quite a bit cooler. What if Thomas and his friends are specifically the spirits of those who died in railway accidents? Whenever a driver or fireman steps into their cab, perhaps they even become possessed and have to do the engine's will. That does go some way in explaining the idiotic decisions of the crews in later eras of the show. 5 out of 10. While it's a pretty dark theory, it's nothing to the next one that we'll be covering. The Shed 17 Theory. Oh boy. Shed 17 is a crazy Thomas fan project from quite a few years back, and to cut a long and scarring story very short, its world is one where humans can be biofused into the bodies of machines. Before you dismiss this as just more pointless sci-fi, I would say that oddly enough, the books and show do occasionally seem to support this. In Henry and the Express, Henry gets bloodshot eyes. Like bloodshot, so we can canonically say that the engines have veins and stuff. Ugh. Again, in the show, we do see teeth, most obviously on Billy, or nostrils on Dart and Toby. As weird as it is, this is not a totally stupid theory. Of course, surgery and genetic science have never been at a point where biofusion into a locomotive body has been possible, certainly not in the 1800s when the earliest stories take place, but it's something to think about. Fortunately, the idea of engine families, like Gordon and Scotsman being brothers, does seem to work by build and not by some kind of genetics. If it didn't freak me out as much, I would probably give this theory higher, but as it stands, it gets a 4 out of 10. The choice theory. To move on from that scary theory, here's a really funny one. Every engine in the world has a face, but most just choose to hide them because making small talk with random people they don't know every day is really annoying. Can you just imagine Charlie coming up to Edward or someone to tell a stupid joke, and Edward's so over it that he just blinks a few times and his face melts away? Actually, this might be a creepier theory than I thought, but again, marks for creativity. 6 out of 10. The Figment Theory. This theory probably appears on every single Why Thomas and Friends is a Dystopian Nightmare Show article, but as much as fans probably dislike this idea, it does explain a lot. The Figment Theory is the suggestion that the engines are figments of an imagination, either that of a child or of Sir Topham Hatt. Truro on the Sodor Island forums has noted this line in Tenders and Turntables.
But to hear Gordon talk, you would have thought that the Fat Controller had given him a tender just to show how important he was.
It's the Fat Controller that gives Gordon a tender, not his builders. There are other weird moments too, like the way Topham blames the engines for misbehaving and not their drivers, that give this theory some power. What if Topham is the embodiment of a child, and the faces of the engines are just his way of relating to them on a model train layout? Could the whole show just be a fantasy? Obviously, we should not take this one seriously, but it's also kind of unfalsifiable. You can't prove it wrong, because people who defend it are just going to say, yeah, but the kid imagined it that way. For that reason, it's a 3 out of 10. But now, let's move on to my 2 favourite theories in the whole list. Theory 13, and my second favourite, is the Quandary Theory. This one is super unique, and I give it a 9 out of 10. This is the idea that within the world of Thomas, nobody knows why the Sudrian engines have faces. It's like the 8th wonder of the world. Scientists come to Sodor at all times to do tests, and tourists flock there to see those strange living machines off the coast of Britain. None of this is covered in the show, of course, but it's all going on behind the scenes. I like to think the phenomenon is unique to Sodor, kind of like the Sudrian Theory. The mainland engines in the Railway series only have faces drawn on by the illustrators. The reason this theory is so great is because it takes the fact that we don't know why the engines have faces and puts that fact into the world of Thomas itself. While some fan series have dabbled with this a bit, I think you could make a super cool alternative timeline that centres on the engines themselves trying to find out why they have faces, and what it means to be alive. Theory 14, and my favourite, the Hobbes Theory. The only 10 out of 10 theory on this list, this idea is named after Hobbes the tiger, Calvin's stuffed animal in a comic strip from the 80s and 90s. To 6-year-old Calvin, he's very much alive, but to Calvin's parents, not so much. Well, I think this fits perfectly with the world of Thomas. Whether the engine has a face or not doesn't depend on the engine, but on the observer. That might sound a lot like the extension theory from right back at the start of this video, but we're not just imagining the engines as human here. We're not just drawing similarities. We're saying that engines by themselves, independent of humans, are beautiful. To make this idea simpler, think about a horse. A horse is alive and deserves to be treated well, whether or not its owner recognises that. There's that same intrinsic beauty, an objective soulfulness, in engines, whether or not we see it. But there's one person who explained this far better than I can, again on SIF, a chap called Evening Star. I'm just going to finish by quoting this post. It's from 2016, and I think it's really beautiful. Evening Star says, "The engines breathe, and they move, and they inspire the thoughts and actions of we happy few who can see them, rather than just looking on. What more does something need to possess a soul? When we hear the shrill of a whistle or longing sigh of a horn, it stirs something within us. The engines are simply an explicit expression of something that we've always known. There's a ghost in the machine. Valves, yes, pistons, absolutely, but voices and personae as well. Without his face, Thomas would have just as much of a soul as he does with it." And that brings us back to where we started. Without his face, Thomas would still have a soul. His face is on the inside of the smokebox door, and it's up to us to imagine it outwards, if you like. That is the beauty of railways. That is the beauty of the Railway series. That is the beauty of this fandom. We are celebrating something that we can't quite explain, but that we all agree is, deep down, fundamentally and mysteriously good. Thanks for watching.